Are freight brokers stealing from truck drivers and carriers? How much profit is too much? That's a question and debate that no matter what social media platform you're on, TikTok, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, there's always a huge debate. All right. Today's video, I'm going to settle that heated debate because I'm going to present you with the facts about how much profit freight brokers actually make. How much is too much, right? Is it unethical? Is it illegal? Is it unfair? We're going to talk about that, all right? So, as someone who's been involved in the freight brokerage industry for over 20 years, okay, I've seen a lot of brokers and a lot of carriers come and go. As a broker, my company, we did over $200 million during my career as a brokerage. And of course, I sold that brokerage several years ago, but I do also have my Freight Broker Bootcamp online training program, which is the most cost-effective and comprehensive online training program. If you guys are looking for freight broker training or freight agent training, you can check that out at freightbrokerbootcamp.com. We offer a 60-day, 100% unconditional money-back guarantee. But back to the point. The point is the two things I'm going to share with you today. I'm going to share with you the real data showing profit based upon over $77 billion worth of freight spend. Okay. So that's shippers that have spent over $77 billion annually. And I'm going to show you the freight broker profit margins based upon that. All right. I've got the data and you guys are going to be able to see it. All right. The two big things I'm going to cover today is how are prices determined in the freight and trucking industry? And then the second part after that, I'm going to show you the actual data on freight broker profit margin. So number one, we're going to start with how is pricing determined? How are freight rates determined in the trucking and logistics industry? It's very simple. I'm going to explain it to you. And I've said it a million times, but for whatever reason, people either don't listen or they don't want to hear it. Freight rates are determined by supply and demand. Now, more specifically, it is the number of available trucks in comparison and relative to the number of available loads in or out of any market. Let me draw you a picture so you understand what I mean. If you were to try to move a van full truckload from Massachusetts to Illinois, right? So from like Boston to Chicago, Mass to Illinois, right? If you were to try to do that, I looked up on DAT and they show you the broker to carrier average pay. And the average pay for that lane is approximately $1.39 a mile. Okay. Now, $1.39 a mile. Remember that. All right. Very important that you remember that. So that's Mass to Illinois van load, $1.39 a mile. All right. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to think about what would it cost to run that exact same load from Illinois to Massachusetts? Same miles, same product, same weight, same driver, same truck, same fuel price, same everything. Well, in your mind, you might think, well, it'd be $1.39 a mile. But in reality, because of the availability of trucks to loads, right? The rate for that is actually $2.86 per mile. So that's more than double the rate to go from Illinois to Mass versus Mass to Illinois. Now, why is that? Well, it's where I started at, and that is supply and demand. There are more loads available in relation to trucks that want to go from Illinois to Mass versus the number of loads to trucks that want to go from Mass to Illinois. Don't get confused, but the reality is it's supply and demand, the number of trucks in relation to the number of loads based on that demand. That is what determines the spot market rates. And that's where most brokers live. Okay, so that's what you got to understand. If you were to look at, for example, other types of equipment besides vans like reefers or flatbeds, or step decks or Conestoga trailers or whatever type of equipment that you want or need or your niche is, okay, you're going to find a different spot market rate from Mass to Illinois and from Illinois to Mass. It's different because the number of available pieces of equipment that are specific to that niche or that type of equipment the demand versus the number of trucks is going to be different. So the spot market is going to be different. All right. So that's what I want you to understand. And, there's lots of things that affect supply and demand. For example, fuel price, economic conditions, and even weather. Those are all things that have an impact on supply and demand. So what I want you to understand, just because a carrier wants $3 a mile to go from Mass to Illinois, and a shipper wants to only pay $1 a mile to go from Mass to Illinois, the fact is none of that matters. It doesn't matter what you want. It doesn't even matter what your truck costs, or it doesn't even matter what your manufacturing costs are or what you're selling it for. What matters is supply and demand. Now, I'm beating a dead horse with this because I want you to understand that brokers, shippers, and carriers are all at the behest of supply and demand. We're all held and constrained by the laws of supply and demand and by the free market that's going on. That's what the supply and demand does. It allows the free market to operate. It allows the free market to make adjustments up or down based upon those market conditions, which is the way it's supposed to be. Okay? So understand something, all right? There are times when market conditions change rapidly and allow a broker to earn more than the typical 10 to 20% on a full truckload. But there are also times when market conditions change rapidly that brokers will lose 500 or 1,000 or more on an individual load just in order to fulfill that order and to retain that customer. So you got to understand, there are a lot of dynamics that go into this. But the fact of the matter is, if you want to understand supply and demand, you need to understand and you need to spend time on the load boards. You need to spend time understanding the dynamics of in and out of any market, equipment types, and all the economic conditions that are going on there. Now, tools like the DAT and TruckStop make it very easy because they've got these rating tools and they aggregate all that data and they can provide you some baseline information on what those costs are, which saves you a lot of time. Now, if you're a truck driver, you should be subscribing and using that data to understand what the spot market is, the same way as you are if you were a broker. Okay, so that's number one. We talked about supply and demand is what determines rates. All right, number two, let's talk about, and let me show you the data. Hold on one second. I'm going to show you something really quick. I'm going to actually show you the actual data for the top 100 freight brokers for 2024. And I think you're going to be shocked. Hold on one second. So you should be seeing the screen you should be seeing in front of you should show you the top 100 freight brokers for 2024. You can see here at the top is C.H. Robinson with $12.4 billion in revenue. You can see scrolling down some of the names that you might be familiar with, like Coyote Logistics and Landstar and, and Allen Lund and Armstrong and Trinity and all these different companies. Matter of fact, even my old company that I sold is on here with $485 million in 2024. Okay, so what I want you to understand is these are based upon data that's been aggregated by TT News. So this is submitted data. Much of this is audited data. Some of these are publicly traded companies. So you can see here is the gross revenue for each of these brokerages, okay? And this is a total of $77 billion, almost $78 billion in freight spend. So this is the gross revenue, and this is what they call net revenue. Now, net revenue is gross revenue minus the cost that they paid a truck. Okay. So it's truly net revenue. So it's before other expenses. So for example, if a shipper were to pay you $1,000, that's gross revenue. And you were to pay a truck $800, the net revenue would be $200. Okay. So that's the example that I want to share with you. This is gross revenue. This is net revenue. This is actually gross profit. Okay. This is what gross profit is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you the gross profit percentage for each of these brokerages and the average amongst the entire $77 billion in freight spend. And I think you're going to be shocked, okay? Because I was a bit shocked. I'll be honest with you, because I wasn't sure how the math was going to come out with these larger brokerages. I didn't know if it was going to be higher or lower, but the fact is it fell right into where I thought it was going to. So for example, if I remove the blacked out portion, you can see here, C.H. Robinson, a publicly traded company where you can go in and look at their financial statements. Their average gross profit margin is 12.78%. Now, that doesn't shock me. They're a large volume broker, right? And so that doesn't shock me at all. There may be times when they're a little higher, there may be times when they're a little lower, but ultimately you can see the profit margins for all these different companies. They range from 12 to 21 to 15 to 10 to 11 to 13 to 20 to 17 to 14, all the way down. And then when you got one at 9.3 or 8, 9.9, you got one at 12. And then when you get down to the bottom here, you're going to see that it's 14.99%. Now, I've been saying this for years. Brokers on average are typically earning between 10 and 20% gross profit, and with an average of probably somewhere in the range of 14 to maybe 17%. This is 14.99%. This is math. I didn't make up these numbers. These are the numbers that have been submitted from audited financials from these companies that all have these audited financials because they're large companies based on over $77 billion in freight spend. Okay. So what you got to understand is this is based on a very large freight spend. So it's a much more reliable statistic than any one individual anomaly that you may see. Now, like I told you before, the fact is you may have loads where brokers might make 30 or 40%, but you're also going to have loads where brokers lose $200 or $500 or $1,000 on a load because they have to fulfill that order and retain that customer. Okay. So what I want you to understand is this: the debate should be over as it relates to what the average profit margins are for brokers, because here is over $77 billion worth of data. And here is what the data says: 14.99% profit margins. Okay. And the reason why I wanted to do this today is because, guys, listen, everybody needs to make money. Freight brokers need to make money. Carriers need to make money. Shippers need to make money. But the bottom line is this: freight brokers, shippers, and carriers don't determine freight rates. Supply and demand, the market determines freight rates, and brokers are simply placed in the middle as an intermediary to interpret that data and to try to connect the two dots. So I understand that I've never been a truck driver, but I can understand, I know a lot of truck drivers, that it can be very frustrating when you're running a load from Mass to Illinois for $1.39 a mile and you're losing money. But I also understand on the other side of the coin that if you're getting paid $2.89 a mile to go from Illinois to Mass, you're obviously making money. So, I want to share this data because I think it's important that we have some transparency and some real data-driven information that people can base their judgments on. Now, I'm not here to change anybody's mind. I just wanted to present the facts to brokers and agents so that they understand what is realistic. And I wanted to present it to carriers and drivers so that they understood that not every broker is out there to get them. And the reality is, just like there are bad shippers and there are bad carriers, there are bad brokers. So you need to base your decisions based upon the quality of that broker and the relationship you have with them. Okay. Not based upon, anecdotal evidence of one time where you thought a broker was making a lot more money on a load. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. If you enjoyed this, if you got any value out of this, hit the like button, repost or share the stream. I truly appreciate it. If you're curious about becoming a freight broker or a freight agent, check out freightbrokerbootcamp.com. Trained over 10,000 students, had that program for almost 15 years now. And we offer a 60-day, 100% unconditional money-back guarantee.